Carson City Audit Committee for September 19th, 2023. Can we have a roll call, please?
Chair Schutte,
Here.
Vice Chair Lambin, here. Member Duke,
Here.
Member Chavez, Member Scalia,
Here.
a quorum is present.
Thank you. Next is public comment and discussion. Is there anyone here who would like to make public comment? Okay, thank you. Number 4, for possible action, approval of minutes. Has everyone had an opportunity to read the minutes? All right, I'm ready for a motion.
Yeah, I move that we from the minutes as presented last time.
Great, thank you. So approved by Joseph Scalia and seconded by David Lambden. Thank you. So number 5, the meeting items. So 5A, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the election. Oh, no, I'm reading the minutes, sorry. 5A, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the review of the Carson City Clerk's Office internal audit findings and recommendations. Sherry Russell Benaboo, you're up.
Thank you. Actually, the grant one was the first one that we completed, but I did put this one first on the agenda because our clerk recorder has to be in Elko today. So, so we're helping to accommodate his time frame. I am going to turn this over to Audrey Donovan, our senior manager at Eide Bailey, to go over the report and the findings.
Thank you, Sherry, and thank you, Audit Committee, for attending today. Appreciate this opportunity to share with you the clerk recorder engagement that we had completed. I have Rich McRae here with me today. He will be briefing you on the results of the audit. And this came about from our FY24 audit work program, which I will update you on in a little bit. I'll turn it over to Rich.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'd like to introduce Ron Huffman. He was a member of the engagement. Along with myself, we conducted the IT audit. I don't believe Ron is on the call, but he is acknowledged on the report cover. Our primary personnel that we worked with during this audit were Frank Abella, Andrew Rice, and Andrew Cobble in the IT department, and Scott Hohen, the clerk, Linda Drake, recorder, and Miguel Camacho, marriage licensing. The purpose of this audit was to evaluate IT general and operational controls within the county clerk's office, including the county clerk, the county recorder, and the elections department, to gain assurance over internal IT controls and address remediation as needed. Our scope for this audit included a review of general IT and administration and governance controls. These include policies, internal procedures, strategic plans, and so on that provide a foundation to overall IT governance. We also looked at information security controls, which focus on the general IT environment over the system's platform, its applications, and the data residing therein. Change control and operational procedures within the environment, ensuring that operational procedures and changes within the environment is controlled and authorized. And then finally, we looked at controls over business continuity and disaster recovery. These include procedures for backing up and recovery of the platform and applications. To conduct this audit, we conducted a scoping survey during the planning phase. With management's input, we identified IT platforms and applications operating within the clerk's office and defined our scope accordingly. In this review, we concluded Landmark was deemed to be a critical application, critical to the operations within the environment. Therefore, our focus of scope for this audit was looking at the general and application controls associated with the Landmark application. Moving on, you can take a look at page 3 of the report, observations from our review. We have 10 observations where we make recommendations where the clerk's office can improve controls. The first observation focuses on establishing a formal risk assessment. The second moves into IT security, and that applies. The second item was landmark password settings. We found those need to be updated to match best practices. Thirdly, operating system and user roles. We're recommending that a review is conducted annually to verify that permissions granted still match the employee roles within the environment. Fourth item was restricting administrator access to the landmark system, ensuring it's only authorized to appropriate personnel. Fifth item was looking at firewalls. We're suggesting, and this one is primarily just a suggestion, but to consider having a third-party independent review of the firewall rule set and procedures for a second set of eyes. We're finding that to be a standard control process in conducting cybersecurity audits, more and more necessary. Sixth item, ongoing monitoring over network capacity, a dashboard and procedures applying to the ability to efficiently monitor operational network capacity. We're making a recommendation concerning adding controls and procedures. Software primarily that would help management conduct that approach better. And seventh item is looking at data loss prevention tool enhancements, such as providing a software utility that would provide a centralized dashboard for monitoring. And then moving into architecture, infrastructure, and operations. Eighth item of our observations, looking at application restoration testing. That should be completed on a semi-annual basis to verify that the systems can be restored to full capacity. Ninth item, due diligence review of third-party vendors should be completed. Should have a formal process in place to look at any critical third-party vendors and ensure that they are matching your expectations with regard to security and compliance and so forth. And finally, in business continuity and disaster recovery, we're recommending that recovery point and recovery time objectives should be validated through ongoing testing of the disaster recovery plan. That's a brief summary of our audit report, and I'd be happy to take any questions or look at any of these items in further detail.
Thank you very much. Does anyone on the committee have a question? Okay, no, thank you. Is there anyone, public commenter in the audience that has a question? Okay, thank you. This is a formal action. Would someone like to make a motion to,
Make a motion.
thank you.
I move to approve the report and direct staff to work on the recommendations as discussed.
Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, it is approved unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, item 5B, for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the review of the Carson City Grants Compliant Internal Audit, findings and recommendations. Sherry.
Thank you. So I'm going to end up turning this over to Audrey Donovan again. This was the grants compliance, the final audit of our fiscal 23 program. They did have this finished in June. They just didn't have the draft report all prettied up by the time we had our meeting. So, so I will turn it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Sherry, and audit committee members. And I will introduce Kathy Villamar to our presentation as well. She is a senior associate with Eide Bailey, and she was the primary auditor on this engagement with myself on grants compliance. And I want to thank you for the privilege and opportunity to allow us to provide this briefing of the grant compliance internal audit. At this time, we'd also like to express our gratitude to everyone involved on the city side that helped us conduct this engagement. The former grant administrator, she was invaluable in the time that she was here, the various grant analysts, the department business managers, the treasurer, and of course, Sherry, who is our main point of contact for this engagement. So I want to just briefly go over why we perform this audit. As you may not know, or maybe you do know, FY22 risk assessment identified the grants management as being one of the risk areas. The audit committee approved that risk area grant management and approved that to be an internal audit project. The objective of the grant management internal audit, as defined in the report, was to determine whether the city's financial control framework and the related internal controls over the management of citywide grants are efficient and effective. Additionally, we were charged to determine whether city grants are in compliance with grant provisions and applicable federal, state, and local laws and regulations. Lastly, our objective was to identify opportunities for the city to improve grant management activities. Our scope looked at from timeframe November of 2022 through May of 2023. And the approach included interviewing the key personnel involved in the grants process to gain insight into the day-to-day management of grants. We also evaluated the city's policies and procedures and the ERP system UNIS within the city for proper allocation of grant funds, adherence to grant terms, and accurate grant reporting. Throughout our approach, we identified areas of both strengths and areas that require improvements with the management of grants and associated internal controls. I will now turn it over to Kathy, who will share the findings and recommendations. Kathy?
Thank you, Audrey, and I will be discussing the audit results, findings, and recommendations. Our audit showed that overall, the city has effective internal controls for grant administration, even in a decentralized model. Each department handling grants follow the city's established policies and procedures, the grant terms, and applicable legal requirements at the federal, state, and local levels. However, we have identified 3 findings with accompanying recommendations to enhance the grant management process. By addressing these issues and associated risks, the provided recommendations will positively add value to the overall efficiency and effectiveness of the grant management process. Management is in agreement with the recommendations and provided detailed responses to each of the recommendations. Moving on to the findings, the first of the 3 audit findings relates to the decentralized and manual grant management process. Currently, the city utilizes a decentralized approach to grant management, which is effective due to each department having a better understanding of their unique grant needs and requirements. However, this decentralized system has presented challenges in retrieving complete and current grant information, including difficulties in accessing a comprehensive and accurate listing of all grants. The city's main grant spreadsheet is manually maintained by the grants administrator and does not consistently align with the individual department listings. Based on this finding, we recommended that the city implement a standardized procedure to capture and document grants received by the departments and conduct periodic reconciliations to ensure completeness and accuracy. Additionally, the city should implement oversight mechanisms to verify the input of required grant information into the system. Moving on to finding number 2, which relates to training. The grants administrator facilitates periodic training throughout the year and maintains a training log documenting the dates and participants for each session. In calendar year 2022, there were a total of 12 training sessions, and we noted 7 personnel from 6 different departments have not attended any of the sessions. To address this, we recommended that the city identify all personnel involved in grant management and perform an assessment of their training needs to determine the specific types of training required. This may potentially need to be done at the department level as each department has specific types of grants. While the high-level grants management training may not be mandatory for all personnel involved in grants, the city should continue to offer these sessions for those who require them. This approach will contribute to a more consistent and efficient process in grants management. Lastly, we have finding number 3, which pertains to the city's reimbursement process. The grants received by the city follows a reimbursement model. Reimbursement checks are sent to the treasurer's office, who is responsible for allocating the received funds to the appropriate departments. The treasurer office's process for identifying the appropriate department for each check is currently not formally documented. Our recommendation is to include this process to the city's grant manual. The documented process should provide a clear outline of the steps involved, define roles and responsibilities, and specify the necessary documentation. This formalization of the process will improve transparency and ensure consistent and accurate allocation of funds. As mentioned before, management is in agreement with the recommendations and provided detailed responses to each of the recommendations, and their responses mitigate the risks identified. And that brings us to the end of this summary for the grants compliance internal audit.
Thank you so much. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? No? Oh, yes.
I just had one comment. I appreciate the grants compliant audit. Grants management is much like herding cats often, and I can appreciate the financial responsibilities of having to herd all these cats. So, good job.
Great definition.
It is. Anyone else? Yeah, my only question, and not really a question, but a comment in terms of the decentralization of grants. And I would imagine that in city government, this is quite common as the different department heads and the different needs of each department. So I appreciate the audit, and I appreciate the ideas and Sherry, the discussion regarding some of the whys and the safeguards. So
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely. And when we get on to the next item, we'll talk more about those safeguards.
Exactly. Thank you. And so, would anyone like to make a motion?
I move to approve the report and direct staff to work on the recommendations as discussed.
Is there a second? I would second that. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Recommended for as discussed. So thank you. Next on, and thank you, Kathy. Next on the agenda, agenda item 5C for possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the monitoring, review, and closure of internal audit findings and/or recommendations included in the audit findings tracking report and providing a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors to close completed findings and/or recommendations. Sherry, it's yours again.
Thank you very much. As we go through this very colorful report, the for discussion today are the orange ones. On the front, there's a little legend as to what my little colors mean. I'm just hoping things stand out a little better to you so you don't have to read the whole thing every time you get it. Community development, we're not going to discuss today. Those dates are all in future dates as to when they are expected. Same with the IT vulnerability and the body-worn cameras. So the first one is the review of the utility billing process. There are two that we're recommending closure on today for that one. Finding number 1, which really had to do with Tyler Munis conversion issues we were having with emails and and getting the program to work as it was supposed to. And my understanding is they have discussed and fixed most of the significant issues we were having with that system. There are some little bugs that happen occasionally, but I think that's with every single system. So, so I was going to ask that we close that one. And then item number 8, this is finding opportunities to reduce the cost of billing by encouraging people to use our e-billing. And we have a lot of senior population here in Carson, and I know my mother is one of them. If she lived here, there is no way she would want an e-bill. So as much as we can encourage them, we cannot require it. So the Treasurer's Office and Public Works Department are very familiar with this issue. They are encouraging customers, and so that's really all we can do. So I am asking to close this item as well. In the past, they have wanted to do one at a time, but I can go through all of them and we can close all of them, whatever the pleasure of the committee.
Is there a preference? Okay.
All of them? Okay.
Is everyone comfortable with that? All right, carry on.
All right. The next one is the grants compliance. So of item 1, it was broke down into 6 different subcategories. And so item 3, 4, and 5, I am going to ask that we close. So item 3 is really an oversight mechanism. And we do have that. We have Munis. All of our grants are in Munis. They are, you know, the spreadsheet that the auditors were using was only in the past updated once a year. So due to a timing difference and when we get the grants, I agree that spreadsheet needs to be updated more often. So we've already implemented a quarterly review of it in my department. We're going to put it on Teams so that everybody has access to update it as the year goes on. So hopefully we'll have better information as the year goes on. And as we bug them quarterly that they're not putting their stuff in, hopefully that spreadsheet will be more useful in the future. But we really use Munis, our financial system, to track all the grants. That is the most important. And I think that is accurate. There's oversight, there's workflow built into it. Every single time they have a new grant, we have to approve that grant number. We have to approve the account numbers that are associated with the grant number. And the information put in there, the items scanned in. We do look at a lot. The information is not going to be consistent because a federal grant is going to need different information than a local grant. So as we're, inputting that information, it's not going to be consistent, but we know that what's in there is what's supposed to be in there. That's why there's the review process. So I really think we are currently doing this, and I don't know that there's anything else I can do to enhance it, other than what we've already decided to do with the teams and that.
I have a quick question
Yes.
on that. So what you're saying is from going from once a year to now implementing quarterly.
So checking the spreadsheet
Checking
quarterly.
right.
Yes.
And so that will give you an opportunity and everyone with the department heads to kind of see what's going on, what kind of progress there is, just kind of that general checks.
Well, the spreadsheet we really do to get a bird's eye view of what grants we have
Mhm.
currently at the moment. So I don't know that the department heads really use that. That's
Okay.
more for just my office and auditors when they come. So
Perfect.
we have a
but-
complete picture of what grants we have out
So
there.
a screenshot, if you will, of what's going on. Perfect.
Exactly. So keeping that spreadsheet more up to date, I think will help the auditors and help us have that bird's eye view.
How can you ensure that that spreadsheet is getting updated by the departments if there isn't a centralized?
Well, that's why I'm saying we're going to review it quarterly.
And are there any repercussions? Aren't there quite the right word, but is it just your office just tracking it down and talking to the different departments to update it?
We start with that.
Okay. So they're
And then if it has to, I'll talk to the department head.
Okay.
And we'll get it updated.
cool. That was my question. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Is this spreadsheet also following the criteria that might be assigned? You know, when a grant is given, you know, certain things have to happen at certain times. And
We
they
usually-
are required to be policed along the way to make sure that they're accomplished.
Yeah, no, we don't get down to that detail. So each department has a program manager that's responsible for tracking its own grants because they're all different. They've all got different requirements, different reporting deadlines, different types of reports they need. So, so I think one person doing that would be overwhelming. So what we track on the sheet is just what's awarded, the name of the grant, the CFA number if necessary, the awarding agency. There's just different things that are on that spreadsheet. They give us a bird's eye view of what grants we have out there at the time.
Okay.
So, so if you want to get more into the granular detail on a specific grant, you have to go to that department.
But it's just a step or two down from
Yes,
where you're at with this, but they are tracking.
yes,
Thank you.
no problem. No more questions. Item number 4. This one is talking about working with the IT to implement a tracking system, get like a user-friendly dashboard. Because I put together the city's budget, I know we do not have extra funding for this type of dashboard. And I don't know that it would do anything more than the bird's eye view spreadsheet would do. I know they talked about performance indicators, that kind of stuff, but unfortunately we have so many different types of grants across the city that I'm not sure it would be overly useful to have performance measures on all these different types of grants. They all start and end at different times. I mean, they're just all so different. So I don't know that that would be a useful source of funds to develop this dashboard. So while other granting entities, and because these are like, so I look at the findings, especially some of the ones here, as best practices, right? So big cities might have a dashboard for the health department because the health department, I know our health department has the vast majority of the grants at the city. So they might have a special dashboard just for the health department. But we're looking at Carson City, and so I don't have those huge resources that those other governments do. And so I would suggest that we pass on the dashboard finding and go ahead and close that and say that that spreadsheet will be kind of our dashboard until we get big enough to have the funding to do that. And then number 5, I'm sorry, is this is, I believe also, they want IT to work with Munis to configure the grants module, which is a module of our Munis system. When we first implemented Munis, July of 2019, we looked at this grants module and we looked at the project management module. And the project management module is a lot more useful. It was working. It was pulling in all the necessary information. You could store documents there. And it just really did everything we wanted to do. The grants module really just was a document storage place. And it would pick up some revenues, but not all the revenues. And I think it was supposed to be, or it's meant to be, something to help you with your reimbursement requests to other agencies. But if you've ever done grants, you know that grants, all the forms are different for reimbursement requests. So I haven't seen a real great use for this grants module. Maybe at some point in time they'll enhance it where I know all the information is there, because it seemed like it wasn't picking up journal entries. Like when we fixed something and did a journal entry, it wasn't picking that up. It was only picking up like the actual revenue cash that came in. So it didn't have accurate data and it wasn't picking up everything. And so we decided not to use that. Some entities or some departments are using it for document storage, like all of their reimbursement requests, they're scanning them in, which is fine. But we're not requiring them to use that. We're kind of pointing people towards a project manager. So this is something that I'm requesting we close as well, because this is something that we're gonna have to just keep checking that grants module to see if it's working, if it's doing what we need it to do. and if we're ever going to move to it. Because the project manager is doing exactly what we needed to do, so we might never move to it. Item number 2, while I agree it would be great to have somebody that tracked all of the grant training citywide, that would require an extra FTE in my department because I do not know what the department-wide, who they've hired, what their experience was prior to being hired, how much they already know versus what, we train. We train in my office, it's very high level. It's meant to be for all of the staff. So it's like uniform guidance 101 kind of thing. Whereas, if you're doing FTA and you're in charge of Jack for the city, you are going to need some specific FTA grant training for that. And most of those departments like FTA, HUD offer great classes for free. So a lot of times it's really the department director and the employee who kind of decide, I need this training. So I will definitely let all the department directors know that if they cannot find training, we will help them. The grants administrator and myself will help them find training, but it really is their responsibility to make sure that their grants employees are trained. So that's really why I'm asking to close this is we don't have the money for an extra FTE just to make sure everybody's trained and monitor them and make sure they took the training and get evaluations on the training, all the stuff that this is going into. So I'm asking that we go ahead and close it with the caveat that we are doing it. People are getting the training that they need, and we'll make my office a backup to finding the training that they need if they can't find it. The last audit here is the clerk's office. That's the most current one. And so there are 3 items we're asking to close on this one right away. And I've got the IT team here to help me because a lot of this stuff really doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm an accountant, not an IT person. So it sounds like number 1 is a formal risk management program is not placed over IT. The CISA cybersecurity self-assessment is what they're recommending. And it sounds like we currently do a CISA engagement. But they'll be looking for a risk assessment at a future date. So help me out here, Frank.
So CISA, we have my Frank Abella for the record. So CISA, we have a monthly engagement with CISA. We have reports from them. We communicate on a frequent basis and everything else. So we do have an engagement with them on a constant basis. So monthly is actually pretty minimum for us. We actually talk to them almost weekly. So.
And then the second one is landmark password security. The city has a 90-day password change policy, and this was just getting that system on that functionality, which they have immediately. They got that on that functionality. And then number 7, the data loss prevention tool. There's already a force point, which is functional citywide, but it's now functional on the landmark system as well, right?
Actually, sorry.
I thought I had that one.
No, you did. You were close. So currently we have a company called Sophos that is doing our DLP or data loss prevention. We are moving to ForcePoint that was just purchased, and it's not quite fully implemented yet for the landmark system or anybody within the clerk's office. Hopefully we'll have that up by the end of this month. So we're trying to get it out by this month and everything else of that nature prior to the election. But yeah, we're off a month right now.
So what you're saying, with the data loss prevention tools are in place, but the centralized prevention tool is not, but that's online to be completed shortly?
That is correct. We have Sophos, which is the data loss prevention, but we need to get a better one out. It's just more more granular reporting for us and everything else to make sure that we're actually seeing data being lost and be it and transferred when it's not supposed to be. Sophos does do that, but we need a little bit more granular information in case there is a breach or there is what they call a data spill. I hope that answers your question.
And then I had a question that's from my own past experience, but once you have the centralized tool in place where you're collecting, everything off-site, how often do you go back to check to make sure it's actually there?
Daily.
Cool. Thank you.
If we want, I just talk to Frank real quick. Item number 7, we can change that date to 9:30 and then discuss it next time, and we don't have to close that one today if you're not comfortable with the force point, since it's out a month.
I would prefer that.
Okay.
Is everybody okay with that?
No problem. All right, that is all the items we're asking to close.
All right, is there any discussion from the committee?
Chairman, I was good with pretty much everything, but item 2 where, the training, that I keep feeling that somebody should be responsible for at least knowing, oh yeah, they get their training, they figure it out, and they get their training, they figure it out, but that, I don't know, an oversight, just making sure that even the new people are coming in, that after they're done, are asking, well, what'd you learn? It's kind of a stupid question, but it allows you to then go back and actually start checking things out. Yeah, they did learn all the things that were, given to me that would be applicable to that. And the oversight, I'm just kind of, I have a hard time with that, they take care of it.
So, yeah, so I understand what you're saying, and that's kind of a best practices thing. We just don't have a FTE available to do that.
You have a what?
A full-time employee
Okay.
available to do that. So the director ultimately is responsible that his employees are trained and take the training. So, if I would love to have an FTE to make sure everybody gets their training. Like HR has, required training every year, and they spend a lot of time making sure that everybody does it and they get the certificates, and it just takes hours upon hours. And so my grants administrator is only one person, and she has grants that she has to manage as well as, citywide doing these trainings. And she does make sure that the new people come to the grant trainings, the new hires. She does specifically call them and make sure they know, and they come to the grant trainings. The problem is sometimes we steal an FTE we steal a full-time employee to work on like the FTA, the Federal Transit Administration grant for Jack. We might steal them from RTC in Washoe, and they've been maybe doing it for 20 years. So they might be completely up to speed on that grant and don't need a whole lot of training. And the director of that department knows who he's hiring. He knows what kind of training they need. So that's where we fall short, because we're not involved with the hiring. We don't know who they're hiring, what experience they have, what they need. So that's why we rely on the director to make sure that people get the training they need. But like I said, I will reach out to the directors in case they don't know what kind of training they need. They can always contact us, and we can find training. Well, if they get a new grants person, they say, hey, I need training, they can contact us to help find training that's specific to what they need.
Oh, you're.
Sorry, maybe I should just leave it on, but in the last 5 years, have we ever been bitten by somebody just not knowing what they're doing and going ahead and making a decision to?
No. We actually have not had any grant findings in the last 2 years. The finding before that was kind of off. It was an NRS, uniform guidance discrepancy. I can't think of where the person just didn't know what they were doing. Because I think the one before that was they just picked up a wrong number on a report.
Okay. In my
So-
experiences of most of the employees that I've had in my history, all wanted to do a good job, and they were reluctant to come back and ask me a question they thought they might have asked 2 or 3 times, and they make their best choice, best decision, informed decision, but they're still guessing.
Some employees do that.
Okay, but we haven't, Carson City hasn't been hurt by it,
We have not.
so, okay.
And I can tell you, I think all of the directors and myself encourage asking questions. We have an open door policy. I can't imagine people being scared to ask a question.
Okay.
We do have some great people working here.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Then bringing this back to the committee. What is the preferred action on these items? Would you like to?
I'll make a motion
Okay,
if you're
thank you.
ready.
Was there any other discussion? Okay. Any public comment? All right.
Okay, I move to recommend to the Board of Supervisors closing the items discussed based on the correction of findings and recommendations included in the audit findings tracking report.
Just a second, with the exception of number
7, I believe.
7, that we'll be keeping open until our next audit meeting, at which time we'll address.
Yeah, and you can say as discussed on the record, and then it'll be exactly what we discussed on the record.
Perfect, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
And is there a second?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, motion passes.
Thank you.
And thank you for the discussion, everyone.
Yeah, it's really helpful. If I had somebody who was available to do it, I would absolutely, implement something like that. I just don't have the staff.
And just experience with hearing about grants in other departments and, Health and Human Services, for example, and that they have so many grants and they are so keyed in on how to follow the requirements because it's critical that it's done right for the programs that they're trying to, and that they are successfully running. And I know Transportation, Public Works as well, that it's critical. And so it is a priority in terms for the department heads to make sure that it's done correctly.
Yes,
So,
absolutely.
thank you. Okay. For possible action, discussion and possible action regarding the cash handling internal audit program and the accounts payable and procurement card internal audit program suggested by the Carson City Internal Auditor, Ide Bailey, LLP, for the fiscal year 2024 audit work program. Sherry.
Yes. So this is for our fiscal year 24 audit work program coming up this year. We already looked at the clerk recorder's agreed upon procedures because we wanted to hit the ground running on that one. So this one is for the cash handling and accounts payable procedures, which will be next. There is a last and final one that'll come towards you probably the next meeting, which is the DevNet system we talked about for the assessor's office. And that one, we can't really look at that in the next 3 to 5 months because the assessor is getting their property taxes ready for 2025. So they're very, very busy. So we will be probably bring that back to the next meeting in December. But for now, these are the two that we're hoping to get approved so they can start working on these two. I'll turn it over to Audrey.
Thank you, Sherry. What you have in front of you here today are the two outstanding agreed upon procedures. As you know, Carson City has performed the cash handling internal audit engagement in the past, and we had, I believe it was 20 findings, all of which have been closed out. And part of this process of looking at cash handling for FY 23-24 will start with working with the Treasurer's Department to ensure that we're not duplicating efforts around cash handling and related to the areas that they may have already been in certain departments. So what you see before you is a refresh of the audit program that we used last time, mainly to, high levels, identify any recent changes, if there have been changes to the policies and procedures. We will be looking to that for our criteria. We'll be interviewing individuals to get a better understanding if anything has changed in this area, and then get right into testing and spend the majority of the time looking at the cash handling activities and ensuring that that meets the objective of the engagement, which is ensuring that cash is handled appropriately, that internal controls are in place to reduce the risk of misappropriation, that cash and receipts are prompt, accurate, and completely reported, and that internal controls include the safeguarding of assets, proper segregation of duties, the accountability, reconciliation, and monitoring aspects. That engagement from the budget, the risk assessment budget and the annual audit plan is $20,000. The next engagement, which is accounts payable and P card, I'll start with the budget there. It is $10,000. And so you can see here there's a lot of information that's more high level to conduct this engagement. Again, looking at what is the difference as we've been conducted this engagement more recent than the cash handling, and this is a refresh of the last program. And you can see here for accounts payable and P card, we have a note here that we will go high level with the first handful of steps and focus on the detailed testing, which are the last few steps to really identify if those controls are working properly for these activities that we'll be looking at. Happy to go into further detail and walk through areas of what the testing will look like, but would like to turn it over to you if you have any questions.
Thank you, Audrey. Are there any questions? No? It looks like an excellent plan. So thank you very much. And there's no one here for public comment? And any other discussion? All right, then, would someone like to make a motion, please?
Yeah, I can make a motion. I move to direct Ed Bailey and staff to proceed with the cash handling and accounts payable and procurement card internal audit programs, including agreed upon procedures as discussed on the record.
I'll second that.
Great, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously. Thank you. All right, and then item 5E, for discussion only, discussion regarding fiscal year 2023 and 2024 audit work programs update and hotline activity. Sherry and Audrey.
Yep, and I'm going to turn this right over to Audrey because this is her update for you guys.
Thank you. So I will start with the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline, and we do not have any reports as of today. The last report that we had submitted was back in March, and the one before that, those two were not applicable to the city. We get some kind of strange reporting that goes on where individuals will make reports around banks, living arrangements, pets on the loose, and these are those types of reports that came through. Though those are the easy ones to close out, and we do monitor that on a monthly basis, sometimes more frequent than that. And if we do see something come up, we have our escalation procedures, and we do work those cases and reports until those are closed out. But don't have anything to report on that. And the next is the update on the budget to date. We have two areas that we keep track of budget-wise, and one of the areas is internal audit related activities, which includes the annual risk assessment update, the fraud, waste, and abuse hotline monitoring, and follow-up activities. To this date, we have not expended any funds from the amount that's allocated to that. So we still have the full remaining 16,375 or 85 hours. And when it comes to the FY 23-24 proposed internal audits, we have closed out the first engagement, which is the clerk recorder information technologies audit. The second one is the DevNet system for the assessor's office. As Sherry mentioned earlier, we will bring to the audit committee at the next audit committee date the agreed upon procedures to move forward with that engagement based on the time frame that the assessor's office has available for us to conduct that engagement in their office. The third one is cash handling internal audit, and upon your approval of the audit program, we will, following this committee meeting, we will conduct that audit work, and we'll have that available, the results, at the next audit committee meeting. The accounts payable and purchasing card transaction, we will kick that one off at the beginning of November as the accounting finance department, Sherry's group, needs a little bit of breathing room until some things slow down in her department. So we will pick that one up in November and likely be able to conclude this by our next audit committee meeting as well. So we have expended roughly $30,000 of our $110,000 budget, and we will start moving on cash handling next.
Thank you very much for doing the AP November 1st. We're doing our financial reporting right now, so getting together that 200-page ACFR is always a little bit of a challenge.
All right, well, thank you, Audrey. We appreciate the update.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Next on the agenda is discussion regarding dates for the next meeting.
So our next meeting would be every 3 months quarterly, so December. Does that give you enough time to finish your audit, Audrey, or should we try to do January? I know December is kind of a tough month because it's Christmas.
January would give us more time to complete both of those engagements, and I concur, December is a rough time to get everyone together. If we move towards the beginning of January, that would give us time to be able to complete both of those.
Okay. Is anybody, are you available like the 2nd or the 9th? Everybody?
The 9th
The 9th?
would work well.
9th? Okay. All right, let's set it for January 9th. And as always, let me know if there's any issue pops up. But we'll tentatively set it for January 9th. 2024, I can't believe it's almost 2024 already.
Great. Okay. Thank you. And then our next on the agenda is public comment. And I see no public here. All right, then finally, for possible action to adjourn.
Thank you
I
all.
move that we adjourn.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.